Hello to you, and welcome to another Makers Podcast from the New Stack. I'm Darryl Taft, news editor for the New Stack, and our goal is to continue to give you the latest and hottest information about the big developer trends and issues of the day. Our episode today covers the Go language and its growing importance in cloud native computing. And our very special guest is Steve Francia, who is the product lead for the Go language at Google. Steve comes with a very impressive pedigree. He comes from having done lots of work with Docker, MongoDB, he's on the board with Drupal, and he has a few other projects that he's built and contributed to the community. Steve, do you want to talk about any of that?
Sure. So I guess we'll work backwards. Well, why don't we start with MongoDB? At MongoDB, I led our developer experience there, community, developer relations, and engineering. And it was a great experience to be able to really transform how the industry um, worked with databases. While I was there, I discovered Go and fell in love with it. And that took me to create projects like Hugo, which is a popular static site generator in Go, and Cobra, which is a popular CLI framework. It also led me to join Docker, where I led engineering, and then actually joining the Go team. And during all that time, I was also on the board of Drupal, helping them out, and really grateful to be a part of that community. And I had previously always admired them. I think they're the best, still the best run open source project in terms of contributors. And being able to help them and learn even closer was a great experience.
So, why did Google create Go? I mean, what was the need at that point?
So I wasn't there for it, but there's a kind of popular story that Rob Pike, one of the creators, tells of he was sharing an office with Ken Thompson. Both Rob and Ken have very impressive pedigrees, particularly in language creation. And they were doing a small change to a C++ program, and then they sent it to Google's giant compiler build farm, and it took 45 minutes. And the two started talking about what a modern language could look like. And they grabbed a colleague, Robert Griesemer, and the three of them started whiteboarding. By the end of that 45-minute build, they had sketched out a lot of what became Go. And so some of the motivation was to see if they could build really a systems programming language that was compiled and type saved with security as a big focus, but also something that could compile really quick. So it felt more like a dynamic language and something that scaled in two directions. And we talk about, Google, we have lots of projects with hundreds of developers working on them. Kubernetes is a good example. And the developers are really dynamic. They come and go. And so you really need to come up to speed on the project quickly and be able to contribute. And so Go's readability and simplicity make it really scale well across people. Also, its modular nature really scales well. And then we also wanted to scale on the computer side. And so Go it's at least the first mainstream language to really build concurrency as a first class citizen and really as a core part of the language. And that's one of the ways that Go really kind of differentiated itself in being able to scale across many cores and even many machines.
Mm-hmm. So, has it lived up to the expectations that these guys had or exceeded it?
Oh, I think far exceeded. At the beginning, it was really a research project to see if they could come up with something. And I've talked to Rob about this, and he says it exceeded well beyond their imagination for what it could have been. And we continue to exceed. He and I had that conversation several years ago, and we've only grown significantly since then. So yeah, we really, I don't think any of us saw um, quite the potential of Go, or any of us could foresee it living up to the potential that it had from the beginning. And the response from the community and our users has just been phenomenal. It's really great to see a great community build around it.
Hmm. So, would you consider Go to be the language for cloud native computing?
I would, and I think there's a lot of evidence that it's not just me who believes that. We have, if you look at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, 75%, over 75% of the projects are written in Go. That's kind of incredible. And of course, we talked about Kubernetes, but there's a lot of other cloud native infrastructure projects that are written in Go and really pushing what cloud computing is. From an application standpoint, Go is really making great strides there as well. So first we were on the infrastructure side and really took a big foothold there. And in the last couple of years, we really moved to cloud applications, and we're seeing huge adoption across the enterprise, especially as people are looking to migrate to the cloud, modernize to containers and serverless. Go is a great fit for all of that, and companies are really adopting it quickly.
All right. So, what is Go borrowed from other languages, older languages, and what kind of influence do you think it could have or will have on future languages, or has it already?
So I'll answer the past and then talk to the future. So a couple years ago, I gave a talk, which you can see on my blog spf13.com, called "On the Shoulders of Giants," and this one talks about the influences that went into Go, and there's a lot, too many that we would able to really be able to mention here. Um, but it's likely every language you've heard of and a lot that you haven't, and dating back to the 60s. We've got ancestors for like Algol, which was created in the 60s. Um, and um, and I think what's interesting is we had three founders of the language come from three very distinct backgrounds. One's Robert Griesmer, came from the European language branches like Modular and Oberon and Pascal. And Ken Thompson created B and then worked with Dennis Ritchie on C, the C language. And then Rob Pike really had a lot of experience with concurrent languages. And so the three of them kind of had a meeting of the minds where they brought together, and I'll also say, I don't think there's ever been a language with so much experience held by the creators. These are people who have designed many languages over the years, had a lot of experience doing so. And frankly, I don't see how you could have someone with more experience than our three founders together. And so they took all of that experience together, which involved lots and lots of languages, some obscure ones that were just in research languages to mainstream ones, and a lot of that went into Go. And it's interesting, if you come from another language, you're likely to see something in Go. Say, oh, I used to use that in this other language. And that's by design. There's not a lot of new features in Go. Um, it's really the collection of all these features together that makes Go special. As we look to the future, we see that Go is influencing new languages and even old languages. So we've seen a lot of the mainstream languages have started adopting elements of Go. I can speak to two of those that we're seeing pretty broad adoption of. One is we kind of had a crazy idea when we started Go, of this idea of Go Fumped, which is Go format. And it's a tool that formats everyone's source code to be identical, always using the same format. And we weren't sure how that was going to be received. And it turns out it was one of the best ideas we've had. And it made the code so much more readable for everybody. And since then, a lot of languages have adopted that same practice. And then another one is concurrency. Go took a somewhat unique approach to concurrency, and we certainly weren't the first language to try and come up with parallelism or concurrency, but a lot of languages have adopted Go's approach, and that's been great to see. And then there's the new languages. I think I'll speak to two there. There's Rust, which Go and Rust are kind of on parallel tracks, and we spend a lot of time looking at how they're doing things. They spend time looking at how we're doing things, and we're learning from each other, back and forth. And there's a good collaboration between the two projects. And then there's a new language called V, that has recently been open sourced, and it's very much based on Go. In fact, if you know Go, you pretty much know V. And so this is really the first major example which a language is almost entirely inspired by Go, and we expect that to continue into the future.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So why would you choose Go over another language, and particularly Rust I'm talking about?
So I think the things that set Go apart from all languages, and we'd include Rust in this, is security, stability, or reliability. It's simplicity. It really strikes the balance of being able to make the best developer experience, really scales to a big team and makes it really efficient to write your code, as well as making it efficient and safe and secure on the server. So it really strikes a nice harmony between those two. And I wouldn't say why you choose Go versus Rust, because it's really when do you choose Go and when do you choose Rust. The two work really well together. In fact, there's an article I wrote with a friend who's on the Rust team, JT, on the new stack, which goes into depth about this.
We
But I
love that
think
article.
the sub, yeah, it was a good one. And we had a lot of fun writing it. And I think one of there was kind of two things that stood out from that article. The first is that Rust is best when you know exactly what your inputs are and you're trying to squeeze as much performance out of it as possible. So something like an encoder, where you know exactly what the encoding needs to do, and you're really trying to make it more efficient. Um, and really, if you're closer to the metal, is generally where Rust shines. And then with Go, it's one of its big strengths is when we have dynamic requirements, and you need to adjust to how the business changes or the users change. And of course there's a scale there, and there's a little overlap in the middle, but generally we see that it falls pretty nicely into the two, and the two work well together. So we're seeing a good amount of companies, and we highlight three of them in that article that are using the two together, for the things that they're the best at.
Can you talk a bit about how Google is using Go? I know it's in a lot of places, but can you
I,
highlight some of
I
the
can.
big
The
ones?
best place is we actually did a series of case studies, which we published on go.dev. And there's 4 case studies, that are things that we can publicly talk about where Go is used inside Google. Um, I think the biggest one of these is actually Google's search indexing platform, where really it's the platform that goes out and crawls the web and figures out all the data and organizes it and makes it so that Google search can run. Um, and what is Google? It's the verb that means searching. So it's really fundamental and core to our business. We also see and highlight usages across Firebase. Google SRE is primarily in Go. It's really the language of SRE. Um, and We also see a lot of Google Cloud. written in Go, much of which is open source, which is really the underpinnings of not just Google Cloud, but every cloud. Every cloud is really built on containers and Kubernetes today, and so there's a lot of Go across the cloud. But it's being used pretty heavily at Google for a lot of things.
How has Go 1.18 been received? What's the adoption
It's
like?
it's actually been great. It's our biggest release ever. It was really monumental release. We have 4 major features, each of which you could build a release around. And the reception's been amazing. We've been received well by our users, received well by the press, and we're seeing great downloads. This is I'd have to look today, but I know our pre-releases, it was the most downloaded release candidates we've ever had, the most downloaded betas we've ever had, and my guess is it's probably the most downloaded release we've ever had. So it's just a lot of interest in it, a lot of people kicking the tires and trying to figure out how to use all these new features. But generally, a lot of excitement around it.
So the major new features were generics, native fuzzing, workspaces, and performance improvements. And as you said, each of those could have been like a major deal in itself in a release. Can you kind of go over the significance of each of those features and what they bring to the language and to
Sure,
developers?
I'll speak briefly about each of them. So generics is the biggest change ever to the Go language. Not the biggest change so far. It's the biggest change we'll ever do. And it's something that's actually been in the works for over 10 years. And that's kind of crazy to think about, that we've spent 10 years. And you say, why? Why? Because we knew that generics have the potential to make a language much more complicated. And we've seen that in lots of other languages. And we even talked to the teams who did that, and they had lots of good advice. And so we really spent a long time, many proposals of different approaches to take, and each of them kind of fell short in one way or another. And then we take that idea and refine it more and more. And we finally got a proposal that really felt right. And there was some concern because of this history of generics in other languages, of adding generics to Go would really complicate the language. And we're happy to say that we didn't hear that with the latest proposal, and that was one sign that we knew that this was the right one, and that a lot of everyone who was kind of worried felt really comfortable about the change. Why is it so significant? Why do we spend 10 years on it? What generics does is it enables people to write really cleaner, safer code. And in Go, there were ways around it. There's nothing you couldn't do before that you can now do, but you can do it cleaner and in a safer way. And that's really important. And also often in a more performant way. And so we're seeing it really open up a lot more use cases and a lot more. Some of Go's strengths got even stronger with the addition of generics. The next one's fuzzing, and fuzzing's an old practice. Go is certainly not the first to do it. If you're not familiar with it, it's the approach where it sends random inputs to a bunch of different functions and finds places they break. And it's a tried and true method. So what Go has done here is it's the first language to really incorporate it as part of the standard build chain. And so it ships with our standard distribution. The fuzz is tightly integrated with the rest of Go. So when fuzzing finds issues, it's able to create a test case for them. So not only does it identify the things, but it actually protects your current code against it and protects future code, so that as you write things and make changes, you'll know that those cases that fuzzing found are still protected. The next one is workspaces. And workspaces is really, if you're not a Go programmer, you won't be as familiar with this. But if you are a Go programmer, you'll know that modules was our probably second biggest change ever to the language, more about the tool chain around the language. And modules has been really well received. We think of it as a huge success. But there was a couple edge cases that were challenging to use. And in particular, really large projects or repos that had lots of different modules in them were challenging. And Workspaces addresses that, and it's done in a really elegant way. And the last change is performance improvements. And this is really part B of some performance improvements that went into our last release, 117. And so what this is it's a new way of, it's a new what's called a register-based ABI. Really what that means is that as part of the way the runtime runs, it's going to be more efficient. But we had to target it for each platform. And so in 117, we targeted the x86, x64 platforms. And in this release, it's the ARM64 platforms, which is like the Apple M1 chip. And so with this, it's about a 20% improvement. It's been fantastic. And I think that's all four. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that is all four. And when I wrote the story, and it got a lot of interest, but some folks had issues with generics, and we did a piece about Vicente Martí and his claim that generics can slow down your code. I don't know if you've gotten involved with that, but what are your thoughts on that?
So it's a good post, and if you have time to read it, it's a very long, very detailed article that was written, and it makes a lot of good points. It certainly is a good article. I think the takeaway here is we've never written generics before. This is new to the language, and so the first release is, in all honesty, our worst release. Every release we're going to have after this is going to have additional polish, more experience around it. And we've already landed a lot of changes that are going into 119 that address some of the issues found. In our testing, we did find that some use cases were slower and some use cases were faster. The net for most people is going to be about the same. And so that's a good post highlighting half of that, right? Where the half that some things went slower, and certainly those cases are there. But what we found is for most projects, if you're implementing generics, you're not going to have overall performance decrease because there's some on each side of that. And of course, that's, we're looking at fixing or addressing the ones that are slower. But I don't think please test, before, if you implement something, run test, make sure that it has the performance characteristics you need. But what we're finding for most users is that they're really happy with the performance of generics today, and we're excited to bring them better performance in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Thank you for that. So what do you think about Go's future as a general purpose language? And what priority is the team placing on developer experience?
So I'll talk about developer experience first. We place a ton of priority on it. In fact, if you look over the last, we've always placed a priority on developer experience, even from day one. And then if you look over the last few years, we've done that even further. We're looking at, we do lots of surveys, lots of research, lots of user testing to find where places aren't as efficient as they should be, aren't as friendly as they should be. And that research has led to things like us adopting the VS Code Go plugin from Microsoft, the Go Please project, which really helps the editors. And the editor experience was good, and now it's great. Also, we partner with Goland and help make sure that experience is good. We spend a lot of time on the command line tools for Go and making sure that those are efficient. And then we've launched go.dev along with package.go.dev, which is this library that lets you search across the Go ecosystem and find the right dependencies. So there's a lot of elements to the developer experience that we're focused on, making sure that they're good and not just the ones that, we're trying to hit every place the developer goes. So from improving our documentation, our learning stuff, like you can go to go.dev/learn, and there's a bunch of great resources there. So we really take a broad view of developer experience, and we're really trying to polish it. And then for Go as a general purpose language, I think Go has a ton of potential. And I'm excited to help it reach that potential. We're seeing a lot of adoption across primarily now 5 use cases, which is cloud infrastructure, actually maybe more than 5. Cloud infrastructure, SRE, a lot of adoption. We're seeing a lot of adoption for APIs, a lot of adoption for web applications, for CLIs, and for data processing. And we're also seeing it merge into things like serverless, where Go is just a really natural fit, and it's really expanding there. And then in the future, we're seeing not our team so much as the community taking it in new ways. So there's a bunch of great GUI frameworks that are in development right now for mobile and for desktop, and there's a lot of good ML projects that are emerging. So there's a lot of potential as Go spreads out from its core, but even within its core, we're seeing lots of adoption.
I saw a blog post on how Go mitigates supply chain attacks. Do you agree with that? Does it mitigate attacks?
It can, and I
can it?
encourage anyone who's interested to read that blog post. It's on the Go blog. But this has been a huge focus of our language from day one. Is really security in general. And Go has a lot of features that really make it stand alone in security. One of which is that most other languages just wrap C libraries for things like SSL and encryption. And Go doesn't do that. We write our own libraries. And so a couple of years ago, there was a Heartbleed vulnerability that was found that affected almost every other language, but it didn't affect Go. And because our libraries are written using a much more secure language, a much more safe language than C. As far as this particular thing, again, read Filippo's article. It's really good, but it talks about the different ways that we've changed our tooling, especially around modules, to address a lot of these supply chain attacks that can happen. And we've made a lot of decisions. And somewhat we've had the advantage of timing. A lot of languages built their tooling before these attacks were really as common as they are now. And as a result, they're kind of stuck into certain design decisions that will be very, very hard to change. And Go had the good fortune of being able to build at the time where we were aware of these things and make a lot of design decisions that enabled much tighter security than what we're seeing in other communities. And so again, read that blog post. It'll go into details on how we're doing that. But security is a huge focus of ours, and we're really grateful to be able to bring this tighter security to our users.
So was that one of the initial aspects of the planning and development of Go, that it'd be more of a secure
Yeah, absolutely. And
environment?
really, coming from Google, that's a huge focus for the whole company is security. And Go was able to be built at a time where we understood that space much better than most languages, when most languages predate the internet. And so we were able to really design from the beginning with security in mind.
What are some of the features that developers are asking for in future versions of Go? And when will the next version be available, and
Okay,
what will be in it?
great. There's one simple answer to both of these questions, which is developers aren't really asking for much features because generics is such a big change. And there's some small things that they've identified in the survey, but really what we're looking to do for the next release, in fact, the next several releases, is understand how this change is affecting the language, and make a lot of really polish a lot of generics work and security work. And so that's what you're going to see in 119, which comes out in, it's slated for August. We usually do releases on a 6-month cadence. And you also see that same theme in 1.20, which is coming out in next February. And so really what we're seeing is kind of stepping back from adding a lot of features and really just trying to polish the features that we've added over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. So is it typical that the developers will adopt the next version, or how does that work? Because I know with Java, it's they got the long-term support versions, and some people don't want to touch it until you get to LTS.
Yeah,
What's the
so
thing
this
with
is one of
Go?
the most shocking things to me, coming from other language ecosystems to Go, is that Go has a phenomenal upgrade path. We've established a reputation of stability, and we've established a reputation of backwards compatibility over the last 10 plus years. And in doing so, our users trust us to give releases that have really seamless upgrades, and they do. What we find is the vast majority of users upgrade within 3 to 4 months of the new release, and quite close to 100% are upgrading within 12 months of a release, but the vast majority are upgrading to the latest release before, during the window when that one is the current release. And it's great to see. It's really great to see, and it really lets us focus on the current user base, which is all kind of clumped together instead of worried about bringing old ones into the fold. So it really lets us focus on making our current release the best release we can.
Thanks. I see that. And I just have one more thing, and that is about the Go ecosystem. What kind of tooling is available for the Go language? And where does it come from? Is it coming from Google, or are there other? I think JetBrains has some sort of thing.
Yeah. So JetBrains has a great product called Goland. And what we're seeing is the two most popular editors are VS Code, which is an open source project that Microsoft started, and then using the VS Code Go extension, which Google authors, along with the community. It's an open source project as well. And so those two editors make up about 75% of the editors used. Beyond that, a lot of it is in the standard toolchain. And we're thrilled about that. That with Go, you can use any editor you want, and of course, there's great support thanks to the Go Please project for Emacs, for Vim, for Sublime, etc. And so, really bring the editor that you're familiar with to Go, and it has all the polish that you need around it, and then the vast majority of what you need is just part of that standard Go distribution. So. We make it really easy to install Go on every platform, Windows, Mac, Linux, and then once you have that, you have what you need to get started.
All right. Well, thank you. I know we're out of time, but I could still talk. I could still ask you questions because there's so much more to be known.
It sounds like we'll need a part B to this.
But anyway, I think we will, and hopefully we'll pick a better time frame when we can get some more of your buddies in. But just to wrap up, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody that listened in to take another just look at another dynamic conversation with the new stack. And as always, we appreciate your support and feedback.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.